Okay, hello everybody. Aloha from Hawaii.
Oh,
And we'll start off with our Shaka Sherlockian, our secret squirrel handshake here that many of you have come to know and love. And a Komo Mai, which is welcome in Hawaiian. And I want to announce that our meeting is being recorded. So you're all aware of that, and it'll be posted on our website hopefully sometime in the coming week. I want to, as always, thanks so much to Please Make It Steve Mason for being the co-host of the meeting, and he really keeps me protected here from making too many mistakes. We usually do a Hawaiian word real quick, and it's a simple one today. The word is pau, P-A-U, which just means finished, over, done. Stick a fork in it. But that's today's Hawaiian word, pau. We'll come back to that later, perhaps. I also want to take a moment to thank many of you and others who have expressed interest in the disaster we experienced here in Hawaii, in Maui, about 3 months ago. It was around the time of our last meeting. And officially, the last count I had heard were 99 people lost their lives in that. And a lot of things, good and bad, are going on to try and get things back in order there. But that was a real tough situation. And I thank many of you for your good thoughts and wishes. I also want to say today is Veterans Day, as officially as I think you know. So, hey, all you vets out there, thank you so much, and we want to recognize that. And we have a few new attendees this time, and as always, you're all very, very, very welcome. A couple of announcements. Membership again in the Shaka Sherlockians of Hawaii is always free, and there's no charge for that. And charter membership certificates are available. Just send me an email at shakasherlockian@gmail.com, and I'll pass it on. I see Elaine. Elaine, go ahead, Elaine.
Yes, I just wanted to also say that today is Remembrance Day in Canada. So we want to remember all the Canadians.
Well, thank you for that. I did not know that.
Yep.
Many thanks.
Okay.
Some of my best people are in Canada. I know that. I have some dear friends in Toronto, Mississauga, I think it is.
Yeah, for Canada, the war ended on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. So that's why it's today for us.
Thanks, Peter. Well, thank you for that. What else do I have to say? Well, I'm going to move right along here. We've got our website is www.shakasherlockian.com. All of our past 12 meetings, beginning with the great Peter Blau and running through several of you that are in our audience today. And our last guest speaker was the great Monica Schmidt, who's busy ironing right now. If you were here earlier, you understand. Oh, there she. Oh, okay. She took a break from the multitasking. But several of you have been here. We've really had some great stuff in the past, and it's all available there if anyone needs to check it out. Having said that, enough of me. I do want to introduce and get to our special guest today. And we're doing something a little different. Normally we have more of a formal presentation, but we thought we do sort of an extended Q&A today about collecting things Sherlockian. There's so many different things that fit that notion, and we've got kind of a world expert with us. I'll tell you, it's as we start our 4th year, it's very much my pleasure to introduce Rebecca Romney to everyone today. Among her many honors and accomplishments, she's a member of the Baker Street Irregulars. I think she got her investiture in 2018. I looked it up. And she's very, very well known throughout the Sherlockian community and a lot of other communities as well. She's a noted rare book dealer and is co-founder and owner of Type Punch Matrix. And I hope we'll hear a little bit more about that later. But many of us have seen her on TV in the History Channel's Pawn Star program, where she is the sort of resident rare book expert. And if you ever have some free time, go to YouTube and do Pawn Stars and Rebecca, and you'll see some really fun moments that have been captured for posterity, figuring out how much certain books are worth and other fun stuff. She's co-author of a book called Printer's Error. I can highly recommend it. It's a fun read. May refer to that again later today when we get to the Sherlockian pop quiz. And she also speaks, as I understand it, 5 languages: Japanese, Greek, Latin, South American Spanish, I assume, and English. They're fortunately for all of us. And I really
it's probably more accurate to say that I read, and I read more languages than that now. But yes, I only speak 3, but I read probably about 7 now. So just a linguistic differentiation. That's all.
Lord have you know. I spent many years in Europe, and in the one of the standing jokes there was a person that speaks 2 languages is bilingual, 3 languages is trilingual. And the joke was, what do you call a person that speaks 1 language? And the answer is an American, because we're not very good when it comes to multiple languages. So I think I'll just stop it there and we'll get started. And please, all of you, join me in welcoming Rebecca Romney today. Thanks, Rebecca, for being here. And where are you coming from? Let me start it off.
So you're going to hear a little bit of background noise when I unmute, so apologies about that, because I'm at an event that starts, right after, and they're doing their thing. But I am in DC. That's where I'm based now. Most people associate me with Las Vegas, of course, because of Pawn Stars. And the funny thing is that I started filming Pawn Stars in 2011, and that was when I was actually living in Vegas. I was managing a rare book gallery there. But then I moved from Vegas to the East Coast in 2014. So for the vast majority of the time that I've been on the show, I have not actually lived in Las Vegas. So yes, that's something that often causes people confusion. I'm in the DC area now, and the Northeastern corridor is where I've been for quite a while. That's where a lot of the activity happens in the rare book world.
Before I turn to questions, and by the way, I would ask everyone to I got to do it myself. I see there's several things already in chat. But if you have a question, put it there, and we can get to it with Rebecca. And I know this is not a bashful group here, but Rebecca, can you tell us, before I forget? I'd really like to ask you a little bit more about Type Punch Matrix. Would you just give us a little taste of that organization and what it's about?
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, that's my rare book firm. And with Type Punch Matrix, it took me a while to found my own firm, because rare books it's a very cash intensive business. You have to spend a lot of money in order to buy the great books. The great material costs a lot of money. And so for most of my career, I worked for other people, and we founded Type Punch Matrix in 2019. And when we founded it, I have a co-founder, and we got together in part because the goal was to create a rare book shop that was an open gallery downtown in DC. And that was 2019. So we were negotiating for a lease in 2019 in downtown DC that ended up falling through for a very small reason. Essentially, another person wanted the space who was already leasing from them, and they decided to do that. And at the time, we were devastated that we lost our dream space to open up a retail bookshop. And then 2020 happened, and our scheduled open date, if that lease had gone through, would have been Memorial Day weekend of 2020. And in retrospect, we realized that we were incredibly lucky, and that we essentially had dodged a bullet. And so TPM, it's typically how we refer to it since Type Punch Matrix is a mouthful. We founded it under very different circumstances than what it ended up becoming. And we had to pivot pretty immediately into a more traditional sort of internet-based model for the most part. Though now, of course, we do book fairs and the like. But, you know, we're generalists. So we can't handle literature generally as a specialty, genre fiction is a specialty, and of course, Sherlockiana is a specialty within that. So we do handle a great deal of that material, but we're kind of open to handling just about anything, which reflects my sort of varied background in rare books before founding TPM. And the title, the name of the company, is actually a reference to the specific innovation of Gutenberg in the Western creation of movable type, because he used a punch matrix system to cast his type, the individual pieces, the sorts, or what they call, of type. And so it's meant to sort of look back to the history of print while also bringing ideally a kind of energy and fun to the moment, which is also, I think, something that incidentally comes from those particular words outside of their printing context. So that's kind of an overview of the business. Joe, I feel like you had also asked, we have a logo. We have a dog logo. I don't know if you see, there you go. Okay, the wagging, so he's wagging his tail and he's barking. His name is Avant Dog. And Avant Dog is our logo, and he really represents what we're trying to do as a rare book firm, because he is sort of a response to the bookstore cat. Like, I am actually a cat person. I love cats. I have a cat. However, you know, the sort of cozy, quiet atmosphere that you associate with a bookstore cat is not actually the atmosphere that we were going for. We're actually much more interested in the excitement and the thrill and the enthusiasm. And we felt like that was much better represented with a dog who is barking and wagging his tail. So that, I think, captures part of what we're trying to do with the business. Is we're talking about how collecting is fun. Actually, this is something that we do because we love it, and it is exciting and it is thrilling, and hunt is the point. That is the purpose of why we're doing it. We love to hunt for things. And I think that that sets up, you know, a number of you are collectors, and I think that you all, you can tell me if you disagree, but I feel like the hunt is a huge part of why you do it, is you enjoy the hunt itself.
Well, that would lead, I know I want to really open it up to questions. And I remember when you did the interview with Stephen Doyle on the Fortnightly Express, there was a great question that is what's more important? Is it the hunt itself or the object, you know, you're looking for, whether it be a painting or a book or a deck of cards or whatever? What's really the main thing there, or possibly both, I guess, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it depends on your metric for importance there, because on the one hand, collectors are part of this larger ecosystem where what we're looking to do is preserve our collective memory. And collectors have a symbiotic relationship doing that with dealers and with institutions. Collectors play a critical role in that. So on the one hand, that is inherently important. But on the other hand, what I've found in my own collecting is that what collecting does is it helps you learn and find things you didn't even know you were looking for. And so from that perspective, the hunt, the process itself is your purpose, is the point, because going through that process is what teaches you things. And you can't know to learn those things. You can't know to go to a book to learn those things because you didn't know in the first place that that's the thing you wanted to learn. You sort of unintentionally run across information that happens organically in the process of collecting. And that's one of the main reasons I advocate collecting, especially from the perspective of not being afraid to make mistakes, just jumping in and trying things and making it fun, is because I think that that is how you incidentally learn a lot of information that you wouldn't learn otherwise.
Very good. Well, let me, enough. Again, I want to be quiet here for a while. I'm sure there's somebody out there. Just can you raise your hand or indicate if you've got a question here for Rebecca on collecting? I'm waiting for some hands.
And this is all the time. If you are, you know, a well-established collector, like some of you I know are in the room are, this is a scenario in which, consider me, this is like the AMA Ask Me Anything. Like, what would you wish you could ask a dealer and get a straight, honest answer for? Like, I will give you the honest truth. I will give you frank answers. So if you have anything like that, I will tell you the dealer perspective on those things.
Well, I see, I see something in chat. I know we've got Jennifer Lowe in Georgia. Jenny, do you want to ask a question here? Unmute yourself. There you go. Go ahead.
Thanks, Joe. Hi, Rebecca. How are you? It's so nice to meet you. I'm a big fan. I have to tell you more about Pawn Stars in the book, but I'm a big fan and I'm learning more about you. How did you get into rare book collecting? It's very fascinating. And the more that I'm learning about you and doing research and finding out more, it's just more fascinating. So how did you get into that?
Accident. It was, I think the way, I mean, most people I know get into rare books usually in some type of incidental way, because it is a very small world, and it has the reputation it has is that it's very elusive and it's very, it's not for the likes of us, it's only in these high and mighty places. At least that's the way that I felt. So, when I was in college, I didn't set foot in my university library rare book special collections. I was like, that place is not for me. They don't want me there. I don't belong there. If I walked in there, they would literally tell me, like, why are you here? Please leave. Yeah. That was how I felt. And so I was quite sure that this world was not for me. I had all of these assumptions about what it was like. And so it was really as simple as being in the right place at the right time with the right background. I was in Las Vegas because my father is a nuclear engineer. And so there are really only 3 places in the nation you're going to be if you're a nuclear engineer. There's Los Alamos, there is a testing site or an engineering lab in Idaho, and then there's the Nevada test site in Vegas. So my parents lived in Vegas. I had finished college and I had sort of come home as a home base before my plan to do graduate school. But I needed a job in the meantime. And so I really thought I was looking for a job to just hold me over until graduate school. And I saw this position opening for a rare book gallery that was going to be opening in the Palazzo. And I thought, oh, that looks really cool. And my first reaction to that was, that looks amazing. And also, I am not qualified because my degree is not in English. My degree is in classical studies and linguistics. So I was thinking that I did not have the right skill set. I said, I am not qualified. And so I was talking to my mother about this. I always have to give her credit, because she was the one who said, don't pre-disqualify yourself. You take all the steps and all the actions on your part. And if you don't have the skill set, then so be it, but that's their determination, not yours. You don't get to decide that, they decide that. And so I went through that whole interview process, and she was right. In fact, I did have the qualifications that they were looking for. The reason I didn't think I was qualified is because I had an idea of what the rare book world was and how I fit into that. And I was just certain that I was not qualified. But I do have a pretty good story relating to the interview process of that too, because one of the reasons that I was qualified is because I was very incidentally well read, as a lot of, I think, Sherlockians are. That was one of the early things that really endeared me when I went to my first Sherlockian meetings, was how you can just jump from author to author very smoothly, and it's very fun. So I am just a very voracious reader of a variety of different genres. And I had earlier in that week gotten a copy of James Joyce's Ulysses from the library, because I was like, I just finished college. I don't have a job yet. I've got a lot of free time. What better time than now to attempt to read Ulysses? This is the only time I'm really going to be able to have that ability. And so I checked it out. And the day before one of my interviews, I had read the whole introduction that talks about the sort of legendary circumstances of Ulysses being published in Paris by Shakespeare and Company because of the obscenity trial of parts of it that were published in the United States by the Little Review. And so I'd read all about that. And then in my interview, one of the things I had to do was write an essay about the importance of Ulysses. And I literally had it in my bag next to me when this happened. And so it really felt like a sign in that moment of, okay, this is the right thing. I have the type of qualities that they were looking for. So that's how I got into it. And it was a moment where I had been, again, I had been thinking that I was going to graduate school. And I was probably in the second week of training when I went, oh, no. This is what I'm doing for the rest of my life. I just knew it. And I was 23 years old. And I watched most of my colleagues in the humanities go off into graduate school and have to deal with all of that and figuring out everything. And I spent my 20s knowing exactly what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. And I know from that perspective, I've had an incredibly lucky experience. But part of that is why I put so much emphasis on not making assumptions about what rare books are, what collecting is, whether or not you can be part of it, is because if I had given into those assumptions, then I would not have had the career that was perfect for me. It is actually for you. If you're interested in it, you just have to go into it. So that was kind of the long and short of a very accidental and very lucky beginning into it. It is, you also, I should say really quickly, you get trained on the job if you're worried about like that. That's the thing, is they expect you to have a historical and literary background because they don't want to have to teach you about like Charles Dickens and Arthur Conan Doyle. But the rest of it, how rare books work, how to handle them, how to look for restoration, all of the practical stuff, marketplace, that they actually train you in a traditional apprenticeship type model because there is no degree for it, right? So it is very typical for people to learn by being hired by an existing rare book dealer and being trained up as an apprentice, which is what I went through.
Good question, Jenny. Thank you. And I've got several others piling up here. Granny Getz, I think it's a comment more than a question, and it applies to some of us for sure, is do you have a significant other who tells you, okay, enough books already? My wife's very tolerant, so.
This is a definitely, you see a big variety of this, of significant others that are either supportive or not, and either get it or they don't. I will say that I currently, yes, my significant other is very supportive. And we fight over bookshelf space rather.
Yeah,
but I've definitely been on the other side of that, and that's always a strain. And it's similar too, you know, when you talk with collectors and they say, oh, I want to buy that, but you know, my spouse would not be super happy about that. So I realized that our love of books is sometimes not always welcomed even by our loved ones.
Well, Brian's got a question here. As a rare book dealer, what red flags do you watch for when someone offers to sell you a volume?
Well, that could be interpreted really, really widely. So there are certain things that I am thinking about. I'm always, if it's signed books, I'm checking signature. The vast majority of signed books that are offered to us are not right. That's a real problem. However, there is, you know, training and expertise you develop in order to be able to determine that. And then this will sound funny, but it's almost a stereotype. If someone comes to you and says, I have these really, really valuable books that I inherited from my grandmother who is now passed, that is almost always a red flag of you got these books in some other, you do not have clear title to these. You probably did not in fact inherit these. So if it is a, you know, oh, I got these from someone who is now unreachable, like that tends to be a question. So, you know, we're always investigating clear title when we are acquiring books. And the other thing that we do with acquisitions, and I think I've said this on the show a number of times, like I really have to handle the book in person in order to properly assess it. So a lot of times people will say like, oh, well, I have this at home. Can you tell me what it's worth? No, I actually cannot, because unless I am actually handling it, I really can't. Part of my job is to make sure that the book is complete, because that's a big part of its value on the marketplace, right? And in order to do that, I literally have to look at every single leaf. And especially for older books, you have to do a process called collation, where you count every single leaf. And if one is missing, it is not just, oh, one of 200 pages is missing, that's going to be 1/200th of the price. No, it tanks the price on the collectible marketplace. And so things like that, you know, even when we make offers, our offers are always pending in-hand inspection. And that's another way we deal with potential red flags of saying, oh, well, this picture, I can't tell if that's restoration or whatever. All of that we always have to finalize in person.
Very
so
good.
I kind of answered that very widely.
No, good. I love instead of me reading it too, I'm going to ask Vicki Lettijex in Chicago. Ask a question. Vicki, do you want to unmute yourself and ask yourself?
Sure. I'm just curious. I didn't realize you read a book. It looks very interesting. I'm wondering if you're planning on writing any more books or working on any other books yourself.
Yes, I am currently on contract with Simon and Schuster for a book that is related to Jane Austen, and it's called Jane Austen's Bookshelf, and it is essentially a exploration of her favorite women writers, because the stimulus to the project was that in the course of my work as a rare book dealer, I do a lot with the history of the novel, and I've read actually a decent amount of 18th century novels, the famous ones, thinking of like Richardson's Pamela and Henry Fielding's Tom Jones, that kind of thing. So I had read all of those. I had read whole treatises on the history of the novel. And when I was reading about Austen's favorite authors, I realized I had read every single one of the men, and I had read none of the women, and half the women I hadn't even heard of before. And so I was like, that's fascinating. Why is that? And so I just sort of delved in, and for each of these women, they had these incredibly dramatic and interesting lives. And we tend to think of Jane Austen as, the first great woman writer in English. And, even today, there will be scholars saying, oh, Austen was the first woman author who's compared to Shakespeare. That's not true. She had predecessors who were compared to Shakespeare and Milton and all of that. She had predecessors who she looked up to and thought were better authors than her, and whose influence you can see in her works. And so it's an exploration, all of that heavily relies on my own experiences collecting, because as I said, I really believe strongly in you learn a lot of things just through the process of collecting. So that's scheduled to come out in 2025.
Okay,
So yes.
And Susan Dollinger has a very interesting question here. Susan, do you want to read it? Or
Once I figured out where the mute button was.
Oh,
Yeah. Late last night, I got an inquiry about whether there was an archive or archives in America that specialize in late 19th century musical comedy or operetta, because one of my Sherlockian friends who has an interest in theater is looking for a score or a book for a musical called The Man in the Moon, which was written in 1899. I was able to find him a specialist at the University of Penn who's written on late operetta, who might be able to help. But I'm wondering if there's anything out there that he could look at. I know we can't find anything in Library of Congress or New York Public Library through the Billy Rose or something like that, because I've already whimpered at them. But I was wondering if you had an idea.
Well, I would say that there are a number of special collections. What you'd want to look for is special collections that have particular specialty in the history of, usually you define it more broadly, which is to say you define that as theater. And you would go into, for instance, Harvard has a great sort of special collection book, right? So when you're defining it more broadly, often you find that there are pockets of really specialized material. And if you go to someone like at Harvard, I think it's Matt, what's his last name? Whitman. Matt Whitman is the curator of the theater special collections there at Harvard. And you say to him, like, this is what we're looking for. This is the era. This is the genre. And he might say, okay, that's not a specialty of Harvard, but given his position, he will likely know the institutions who do have that specialty. And there's also a reference work, I think you can Google online, something along the lines of special collections, department specialties, something like that. And it's an online resource where you can read about what different special collections and rare books institutions across the country have as their areas of strengths.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly the name, but it's something incredibly boring, just like that, of like subject area specialties of special collections. So
the thing I've been looking for and think I will never find is William Gillette's copy of the memoirs. I've already found his Study in Scarlet and his Song of the Four and his Adventures, but I'd really like the other thing.
Yes, complete it. Well, not maybe not quite, but still, that would be amazing. Other questions?
Rebecca, hi, it's Bob. Good to see you as always.
Bob.
How are you? So here's my question.
Right?
Good. It's good to see you. So here's my question. When I was a young Sherlockian a long time ago, I tried to start collecting Sherlockian books. And what I found, and a good example of this is like the pamphlet house stuff that Edgar Smith did that you're well familiar with.
Yep.
It was very hard to find copies of them. And when I could, they were really expensive. And it took a long time to get them and, you know, took money and it was a challenge. Nowadays, I'm sort of semi-distressed to note if I go to those nameless internet sites where books and keychains and chainsaws are all sold on the same page, that there are multiple copies of those very same books selling at inflation-adjusted prices for less money than I remember paying when I was a very young man. And what I'm wondering, number one, is my impression correct? And two, if I am correct, does that reflect stuff like older collectors downsizing or younger collectors not collecting that kind of stuff, or eBay becoming America's attic? And I'm just wondering how you, as somebody with a specific business, as opposed to just somebody who puts something on a website, views that kind of trend, or what seems to me to be a trend.
Yeah, broadly speaking, this fits pretty neatly into what was a major sort of crisis inflection point for the rare book trade, which was the internet. Broadly speaking, right? The thing that internet marketplaces did is, before you had marketplaces like Aid Books or Biblio or eBay, the way that you would get books is you actually had to be fairly connected. You had to know which dealers had those specialties. Then you had to get on their mailing list, get their printed catalogs mailed to you, or you had to, you know, be in New York and visit those shops. And so on the one hand, I think I talk about this in the Sherlockian lecture I did at Toronto, but on the one hand, collecting these days is really wide open and way more accessible than it ever was for collectors, because you don't have to live in New York if you want to be a collector. You don't have to, you know, develop these relationships with individual dealers to find things. You can do a lot of collecting just, you know, sitting at home doing what we're doing right now. And that's actually incredible if you're looking to build a collection, but you have a lot of constraints. On the other hand, what the internet did, it did something that is called in the book trade the Great Glut. And the Great Glut was when all of these books suddenly became available online, and books that anecdotally and by experience felt scarce, felt rare on the marketplace. You know, you're just like, oh, well, I haven't seen one of these in a couple years. Well, but you may only be talking to 5 different dealers. That's not the same as every single dealer in the nation publishing all of their material and putting it on so that you can see it all at once. And so there are a lot of things that we thought were scarce that the internet actually revealed were common. And this had a very striking effect on the rare book trade, where essentially what was really big is what's called the modern first market, which is mostly 20th century books in dust jacket. And a lot of Sherlockian material is kind of modern first material. And before the internet, the rarity and scarcity was still very highly controlled by dealers who had the authority, the sources, and they were in some ways sort of, for good and ill, but very much still for good in terms of what collectors wanted. They were the gatekeepers. And then when the internet came and suddenly everything was online, you could get it yourself. You didn't need the gatekeepers, but also you just have this massive wave of material. And so what happens instead is you see these sellers who are on, and they're like nameless sellers. They don't have a physical address. You don't know who they are. You don't know what they've done. You don't know if they know how to describe things right. You don't know if when they say good, they mean it's literally good, or if they mean book collecting good, which actually means bad. So you run into almost the exact opposite problem with pre-internet, where you don't have differentiation of quality and authority and expertise. So people run into the problem of, well, I would like to buy this thing, but I don't know if I want to spend $100 on something that's kind of a flyer because I don't know this person. And it's like on this weird list on Amazon, and I don't know what that means. So you have a different set of problems that I think your query and your observation is referring to. I can tell you that young collectors are still very much doing Sherlockian collecting. I can tell you that young collectors are still doing it in a lot of the traditional type of Shaw ways. You know, they are getting the greatest hits. They are collecting voraciously. They are getting, you know, the US and the UK, the proof copy and the trade version. They're getting multiple versions at the same time. They're doing all of those things that, you know, in the heyday of Sherlockian collecting before the internet was happening. But it's going to look different because of the mechanisms that the internet has created. And you do run into particularly this problem with authority and dispersal and a general depressing of prices of things that were not as scarce as we thought they were. That's fundamentally what's happening with you. There are some things that are legitimately scarce, and those have stayed very expensive. But then there are other things that are not actually as scarce as we thought, and those have generally kind of depressed.
You know, about 10 or 12 years ago, Terry Belanger, who's a name I'm sure you're very well familiar with, spoke at the BSI dinner, and he said when the internet hit, certain aspects of collecting became more like shopping. And all of us took a collective gasp when he used the term shopping, and then realized that the world was different. But no, I appreciate your answer. I think it gives certainly me a lot of insight when I look at some of these websites and I see stuff that I would have, you know, gone without eating for several weeks to acquire when I was in my 20s and 30s, when now I can theoretically have them for, you know, what I'd spend at McDonald's. And it's a different world.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rebecca. I've got Bobby Bally is up next. Bobby, can you unmute yourself? Tell us where you're from right now, or where you're coming from, and then please ask your question.
Well, I'm in the UK. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you. That must be pretty late for you.
Oh yeah, it is. It is. Like it's after 11:30. So yeah. I used to be in Egypt, actually. I used to be in Egypt, but then I moved to the UK. So yeah. How about that? And what that story about how you know, you get some shady sellers of these quote unquote rare books. It's a good thing I used Internet Archive to borrow books instead of buying these rare books. Or at least I got to find some of the like the old dime novels, like the Nick Carters, or the old British magazines like the Sexton Blake books, which are now available. They're actually available cheap now because the people own the rights now. So, but yeah, my question, I actually have a number of questions. The first question I want to ask, is, what is the oldest Sherlockian material you ever got your hands on? 2, the second question, what's the most expensive one you got your hands on? And 3, that's something I've been found, and I'm particularly interested in like action figures and toys since I was a kid. Were there any Sherlock Holmes dolls or something before the modern day, like or something like that, before the modern day? And what's the oldest one, your knowledge?
All right, let's take those questions first. So oldest Sherlockian material I have handled is probably and by handled I'm going to define that as bought and sold. And in terms of, because you know, I have certainly handled the Beaton, but I have held it, but I have not bought and sold a Beaton. But I have bought and sold the what you might call the first edition in book form of Study in Scarlet, and that was also probably, is that the most expensive? Hound of the Baskervilles Leaf. That's actually going to be that's more. So yeah, I mean, those, most Sherlockian material is at least the sort of, shall we say, once we get into science societies and the like, you know, most of that is not into the 5 figures. Most of it's under that. There's a couple exceptions, like the Unique Hamlet is probably going to be definitely 5 figures. But for the most part, Sherlockian material is going to be quite a bit less. And it's really when you start getting into, for the most part, when you start getting into the first editions and variations of that and manuscripts, that it starts getting quite a bit more expensive. So that's the first 2. As far as dolls and action figures, I actually cannot speak to that because I don't handle toys. I do handle things. I handle things like games, for example, because that's printed matter. Those games often are created by processes of printing. But I do not handle toys because generally they're not printed. They're not using the same technology. But my guess is there is very likely someone in this room who has more knowledge on that than I do. And if so, you know, please put something in the chat, or, you know, I think you could probably message Bobby directly via the chat as well. So
Thank
sorry,
you.
but I in my business is all about knowledge. Like that knowledge is how I make my living. And as part of that, it is very, very important that I am clear about the limitations of my knowledge. So I am very strict about that is something I do not know, then I will say that. So unfortunately that falls into that category.
That's understandable. That's understandable. I understand that. Oh yeah. Oh, also yeah. Do that also include like foreign, like Sherlockian material, like Arabic, for example, or like any other languages?
Yeah, so I do handle Sherlockian material in a variety of languages. Japanese material is one of my favorite to handle because Japanese is one of the languages that I speak, so I'm much more comfortable with that. But the person to ask about translations of Sherlockian material is Don Hobbs, and his collection ended up at Southern Methodist, I believe, which is an incredible resource. And you know, Don, he was always really great about cataloging his collection, and so he was so extensive, not only with what he sought and a huge variety, but then he documented everything, which, you know, is one example of how a collector can be so valuable to a community, is because, you know, in institutions, the famous thing about institutions is that they are always underfunded and understaffed. Like that is the rule. They are underfunded and understaffed. So they never have enough catalogers. They never have enough curators to find material. They never have enough people to do that. And so this is a huge value add. One of the reasons why collectors have a symbiotic relationship with institutions and dealers is because collectors are the ones who often, through a passion projects, are spending the hours upon hours upon hours doing this research that an institution does not have the financial and or labor resources to accomplish themselves. That was a little bit of a tangent, sorry, but I was in favor of Don.
Now I'm actually kicking myself for getting rid of lots of my old magazines I used to read in Egypt, back in Egypt, because there was an old magazine. There was like a magazine back in Egypt that used to come out in the early 2000s, like 1930s, called Aladdin, which started out as like a Tintin type of adventure about this kid called Aladdin, but started doing something else. It also included a number of articles. One comic they published was a biography on Arthur Conan Doyle and his history of the character and behind the creation of Sherlock Holmes, which is actually the first time I discovered that he actually killed off the great detective with the final problem. And the comic was actually done using portraits, like drawn illustrations of photographs of Conan Doyle and the people he knew, and some of the Sidney Poitier illustrations. And I'm actually kicking myself that I helped my mother to give away those magazines, but I kind of wish I held that one. I could have posted images online, as archive or something, because unfortunately those magazines are not easy to find anymore.
Right. I mean, that's exactly the type of thing that an institution is often interested in, because at least they're preserving it, even if they can't necessarily put it online because of copyright or whatever. And I usually advise people, like, before you throw something out, what you have, it may not be valuable. You know, it may, most of the material we get offered, you know, 99 times out of 100, we're offered material that is old but not rare, that is not in fact valuable. But one time out of 100 is rare and valuable. And so you always,
Right.
always check. So
Yeah.
yes, I would say that institutions are interested, and it's always worth checking. I see Don has a question now.
Yes, Don,
Well,
yes.
thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank
And,
Bye.
and Don, check. Yeah, we have time for about 1 or 2 more questions. Okay, Don, go ahead, please. And you need to unmute yourself, Don. Go
There
ahead.
we go. Okay. Back to what Robert had said earlier about, finding these items on eBay for much less than what he had paid earlier. In general collecting, there are fads and cycles, where things could go boom and bust. Does that also happen in the rare books field?
Yes, absolutely. And I love that you went there, because I almost went there, but then I thought I was talking too much. So one of the main fads, boom cycles that came out of a reaction to the internet age was a really strong shift to interest in primary materials and manuscripts and other types of just primary sources. So, before the internet, it was not as easy to sell, original, like, manuscripts. And I don't mean manuscripts by, Doyle, like a manuscript leaf of Hound of the Baskervilles. I mean, someone's journal who, went through World War I. That type of material did not have a huge market. Some institutions wanted it, but it wasn't the same. And same with even just casual, artist creations. And I don't mean, again, famous artists. I mean, say a Sherlockian fan who is, doing sketches of Sherlock Holmes, and it's not even necessarily published. That material is much more sellable today than it was before the internet, because there's been a move to unique material, because the internet has made so many things seem, oh, actually, this isn't very rare. It turns out I can get 10 of them at any given time, but there's only one of this drawing because it's a, an original drawing. So there's been a big shift to that. That's been a move. But then I will also say that this idea of trends and fads is really relevant when people talk in these terms of, oh, people don't collect anymore. People aren't interested in books anymore. And in my opinion, that is rarely the case. What's generally happening is that younger generations or new people who are doing these things are just doing it in ways that are not necessarily familiar to the normal ways that you have been doing it. And that doesn't mean they're not doing it. They're just, they have different circumstances. So I feel like that's often what's happening, especially this applies to Sherlockian collecting, about how one goes about it. Like, the internet is such a different beast for collecting that I know, for example, some people who specifically do their collections from material they only find when they visit bookshops, and they have to actively make that a parameter rather than it being like a given as it would have been in, say, like 1980.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question, Dawn, and Rebecca. Thank you. I know there's so many different types of collecting that can go on. I mean, we focused, on books, understandably, because that's where a lot of us really spend our time. But I know that Jerry has this extraordinary collection of art, and Steve Mason collects, I think, autographs or signatures from folks that have portrayed Sherlock Holmes, and there's all sorts of different directions one can go, and it's such a there's so much to the world of Sherlock Holmes that it's just mind-boggling at times. I'm just amazed by it. But I will tell you, I thank you so much. We just have a couple more things to cover here in our meeting, and we will wrap things up. But I really, really appreciate you taking the time and the opportunity. Yeah, everybody, thank you, Rebecca. And you'll hear more from me later to say thank you. And what I want to do now, if I may, is turn things over just briefly to good old Steve Mason. In case, Steve, if you have anything new on the Beacon Society or the Legion of Zoom or anything along those lines.
Well, on the Beacon Society, a couple of quick things. Number one, we did really well this year. We gave out almost $12,000 in grants to teachers and librarians and other educators of young Sherlockians. And so Cindy Brown did a wonderful job on that. And so we are very proud that we gave out a lot of grants to people to teach students about Sherlock Holmes. We will have another recertification exam for 2024. Rich Krasunas and I are going to be busily working on that and putting it out. And we will also have a special recertification exam that was actually issued out in 1965, I believe, by a gentleman named Elliot Kimball. And I found this kind of doing a little bit of research in the Baker Street Journal, and Peter Blau actually had a copy of the exam. And so we're going to reissue that in January. It's a 100-question exam, but it'll, for people that have an electronic version of the BSJ, it will not be, or not the BSJ, but the Canon will not be too ultimately difficult, but it'll be fun just to see what kind of a quiz somebody put out 70 years ago. So we're looking forward to that too. On the Legion of Zoom, I just will say we will have our next annual conference in February, and Edith Poundon is busily working on getting speakers lined up for that, and we will put out more information on that pretty quickly. That's it.
Okay, Steve, thanks so much for that. I'll mention one other thing that's been going on for about a couple of months now. It's called, and many of you may know it already, Sherlock Mondays. It's a nice presentation and fairly in-depth on stories from the canon, and it's available online. And they have recorded all of the episodes. If you've missed the first 8 or 10, I think they've done. I think they plan to do about 40 of these. But what I'll try and do is post. Let's see, I just posted on chat a website. If anyone's interested in looking into it, it's at the Rosenbach. Is that in New York, by the way? I don't even know where it's at.
No, it's Philadelphia. We're going to be doing 30 episodes. The episodes are co-hosted, or they're hosted by Edward G. Pettit, who is the Philly Poe guy, who works at the Rosenbach as one of their educators. And then the episodes have rotating co-hosts. Anastasia, Mary Alcaro, Curtis Armstrong, and myself are the 4 rotating co-hosts.
Okay, well, it's really good stuff, and if you all have an opportunity to check into that, I really recommend it. Oh, wait a minute, I think I forgot to hit the enter key. And anyway, hopefully the website where you can discover this thing is found in chat now, and you can copy and paste it or write it down. We'll leave it up there for a few more minutes. Does anyone else have any announcements to make, by the way, before we move into the Sherlockian pop quiz that I know everyone's anxiously waiting for? Shana Carter, please go ahead.
Hi. So just a reminder, those of you in the New York area, the Ash Fall Luncheon is next Saturday, the 18th. I believe reservations are closed. I don't know if maybe you can pay on the day if you haven't made a reservation. Also, if you go to ash-nyc.com, you can reserve a spot at their Sunday brunch during the BSI weekend.
Okay, thank you.
And I run the Gillette Luncheon. So if you're planning to come to that, feel free to send in your reservation and your choice of entree.
Hey, very good. Anyone else? Yeah, Bob.
Yeah, let me go back to Rebecca for one last second, because she's such a fabulous resource. Rebecca, rather than asking about the past, I want you to look into a crystal ball. And what should younger Sherlockians, people like Shana and Monica and my son, for example, start collecting now? Because when they're my age, or even just 10 years from now, when they're still not my age, is going to be really hot and exciting and worth having. Any kind of predictions for the future? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very careful about predicting for the future, because as a dealer, people tend to think that's like investment advice. It's like, what do you think is going to go up in value? But what I will say is that think really meta, which is to say, what do we take for granted now that it's just part of the air we breathe, but in 20 years is going to be incredibly interesting. And I might even get an example of like things like these Zoom meetings, right? Like something like this. I mean, Joe's already archiving these and keeping these, but there are a lot of things that we just associate with our daily lives that will be incredible resources later down the road. And so thinking like a historian about the present and getting meta about it, like what would someone really want to know? What incidental things? That is a really good way to approach it.
Great, thank you.
Playing cards. That's where I'm putting my money. Sherlockian playing cards. There's an answer. Okay, pop quiz time. Here we go. And if you haven't got your chat fired up yet, please do so. I'll read this to make sure I get it straight. But today's one question pop quiz may be one of our easier contests, and the winner will be the first person to enter the correct answer in the chat section of the Zoom meeting. Was there a question?
Yep.
Yes, go ahead. Is that Rich? Who had a question? Okay, I lost it. Okay, I'll go back. And the answer to today's pop quiz is simply a name, first and last name, please. Sherlock Holmes has been associated with many special objects. For example, magnifying glass. We know that one, and I've got one here too that you may recognize. The calabash pipe. And I don't want to incur any wrath from Susan Dollinger here, but because she's the world expert here on William Gillette. But my understanding is Gillette gets the credit for this because he used an object in his famous Sherlock Holmes play that was large enough to be seen on stage, but done in such a way as his face wouldn't be hidden by a pipe, which was pretty smart stuff, I think. But anyway, today's question, let's move on to that. Today's pop quiz question can be verified by no less a resource than, once again, the printer's error. I found this in there, and it's elsewhere too. So here we go. Who is credited with giving Sherlock Holmes his deerstalker hat? Who gets the credit? Bang! It's not Mickey Mouse. Shana got, oh, yep, Shana Carter, followed by several others. Sidney Paget is the correct answer. Very good. Well done, Shana. That's your first win. You will get your second one. Okay, well, you're going to get a prize anyway. We'll figure something out. More on that later. Somebody, I'll for bonus points here. Can anybody tell me what story that appeared in when Sidney Paget first gave Sherlock Holmes a deerstalker? That was going to be my question, but I figured that might be too tough. Oh, Shana got it again. Boscombe Valley Mystery. All right. Clear winner today. Final comments as we wrap it up here. Our next quarterly meeting will be on February 10th next year. And our featured guest speaker will be a notable Sherlockian, no less than the publisher of the Baker Street Journal and a dedicated Notre Dame fan. Stephen Doyle is going to be our guest speaker. And so that's something I think we can all look forward to. And in the same breath, if you haven't already, I recently received my latest Baker Street Journal magazine. I'll put in a plug. Let Steve know we're trying to do that. But don't forget your annual subscription. I got to talk to him. I want to ask him. I need reminders. We get a nice little separate thing usually in the fourth issue, but I always need a reminder to give me an email or something. Say, hey, don't forget to renew. But anyway, with the help of Steve Mason, what we're going to do is to wrap things up here before our final farewell. And we traditionally end the meetings with a special presentation of Vincent Sterrett's 221B poem. Steve, are you ready for that?
I think so.
All right, let her rip, buddy. Rip, buddy.
Here dwell together still two men of note who never lived and so can never die. How very near they seem, yet how remote that age before the world went all awry. But still the game's afoot for those with ears attuned to catch the distant view halloo. England is England yet for all our fears. Only those things the heart believes are true. A yellow fog swirls past the window pane as night descends upon this fabled street. A lonely hansom splashes through the rain. The ghostly gas lamps fail at 20 feet. Here, though the world explode, these two survive. And it is always 1895.
All right, well done. Thank you, Steve, and thank all of you for coming today from so many places around the world: Kuwait, Australia, UK, Canada, even the mainland, some in Hawaii. And I think we can officially say aloha to all, and a special thank you, though, to Rebecca Romney for taking the time today to regale us with a very special Q&A session. Rebecca, thanks so much. Again, more to follow. And having said that, I think we can use our word pow today to say we're finished, it's over, it's done, we're sticking a fork in it. And a final shaka Sherlockian to all of you. Little traditional thing there, and we hope to see you all in February. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care. All the best. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Aloha. Bye-bye. Thanks, Steve. Bye-bye now.